So, picking up where we left off on page 210, we're talking about proximity. And the way you keep unrelated things away is the use of white space and headers and maybe the little HR, the little, the horizontal line thing. So use some white space here to separate. This is about the user's guide. I'm going to show you another technique where I expect people to go to a particular part in this web page. And so I have a technique, which I'll show you later, on how users can go directly to the user's guide without even seeing the stuff up above. So that's kind of related to this. Okay, the last one of the four is alignment. And the alignment basically means that everything ought to fit together. I mean, for example, if I have, in this case, a nav structure here, I have a nav structure that's on the left-hand side, and make them all line up. If I have a little separation over here that kind of matches, it's kind of equals out. I'm using the same color over here that I am over here. It kind of lines up on the left and on the right. So those are the kind of things you're talking about. Most of the time we're talking about a vertical alignment. For example, I chose to have these graphics appear centered. That's just my choice. Okay, that one's not centered. That one's up against the left margin. Yeah, the little ones. The little ones are stuck over here, and so I'm lining them all up. So all these menu choices, these graphics for these menus, all line up exactly the same. If one was over here and one was centered and one was to the left, it would look pretty dumb, wouldn't it? Okay. So basically we're talking about using columns, maybe not real columns, but kind of virtual columns of data. I even tried to make these graphics about the same width, although that didn't work all that well. I tried to make them all stop about right there. You can see how right after the word help, I kind of had to go over a little bit more because it kind of scooted over a bit. But I tried to make these things all about the same size, so visually they all kind of line up. Okay. On page 210, they talk about accessibility again. We've talked about universal design before, and so let's just talk a quick review. Universal design means design something that is inclusive of everyone. Don't design it for 80% of the people and then have some exception to the rule where you go pick up the other 20%. Just go ahead and design it for 99 or 100% of your users to begin with. That's what universal design is all about. So there's some pretty interesting examples, some scenarios there on page 211. You ought to look at those. So things you kind of sort of need to know about. Let's say I'm visually impaired and I'm using a screen reader to read this web page. So the H tags allow me to the screen reader. I can actually, in a screen reader, I can jump from one section to another, provided that I was using section headers. Okay, if I'm not using section headers, then I can't jump around. And it's going to read these words to me. Now, it's not going to read the graphics. I mean, yeah, there are words here in this graphic, so it's going to have to go and get the alternate text for that. And unfortunately, the alternate text for this is probably not going to be that meaningful. All it's going to say is something like, this is a file menu. And then underneath here, it's going to show all the things that are inside that file menu thing. So they get to see everything. They get to hear all the text. So I'm not relying on them reading any of the text in a graphic. Everything I want them to know is also in real text. So graphics are great, but don't make it so they have to read what's in the graphic. Cool. One of the other examples they talk about is people who are colorblind. I mean, don't ever have a scenario where you say, click the red button, because maybe they can't tell what red button is. Or maybe they're on a monochrome screen. I mean, okay, that's probably pretty wild. But yeah, there's some people out there that are still on a green screen monitor somewhere. Don't know where, but maybe in a museum. But yeah, they're out there. So those kind of things. One of the topics in here, or examples rather, is I'm on a dial-up connection at 56K, and my graphics are really slowing this page down. So you say, is having a slow dial-up connection considered a disability? Well, quite frankly, you're asking the wrong question. This isn't about disability. Universal design is not about the exceptions. How many times have I said that? That sounds like a good test question, doesn't it? Universal design is not about accommodating exceptions to the rule. It's for inclusiveness. Make it work for everyone. Then you don't have to go back and fix it. Okay. So yeah, if you have a graphic intensive, this is fairly intensive. Now what I did to kind of make it a little easier is these graphics are not that big. I mean, I make them, I squash them down about 75% of real, mainly so they fit on the screen, and so it speeds up the load time. Don't have a lot of graphics and don't have a lot of big graphics, and so yeah, it's going to slow things down. The other thing is that search engines can't read the text in here, right? I mean, just like the screen readers can't read that. So you know how Google will go and scan your web page so that when you search for, if I search for the word reload from Edge, Google might actually be able to find that. But if I expected Google to find that in here, not happening. So every time you have text inside graphics, you're going to have alternate text for the graphic itself. Plus, if you want them to read that, you're going to have to put it inside your document, just the way I did here. Everything I wanted them to read, I actually have right out here. You know, the first line says reload. The other one says reload from seek data. The third one says save changes. Yes, exactly. Everything I wanted them to read, I got down here. Cool. All right. So accessibility has 4 principles, just like that visual design had 4 principles. This one even has a goofy acronym. It's called POUR. Anyway, their principles are perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. So, perceivable. You have to be able to read or hear everything in there. So, in other words, if I have a video, I better be providing closed caption or transcripts or alternate text, or in this case, if there's text inside a graphic. How many times have I said that? Text inside a graphic, then you better have text that's outside the graphic that says what you want them to know. Operable. Those actionable features like the buttons and like this is a hyperlink here and all these buttons up here. You have to configure these things so that they work with a keyboard, because some people don't have the mobility to use a mouse. I've even had problems with a touch screen. If you make these buttons too small, they might look really cool. And I save a lot of space by squashing them together and tightening them up a little bit, because that's a heck of a lot of screen real estate you're using there. And then you pull it up on your phone, and when your fat little finger, you're supposed to click on the second button. How difficult is that? Yeah, don't squash those things together so much that you can't operate it with your finger. That's what we're talking about. Operable. Understandable. It's got to be easy to read, organized, and consistent, and have the ability to skip around. And the only way that you can do that currently is by the use of these H tags. I can skip to the next H tag, the next H2 tag, which will go through and get me to there. And then I can skip to this. Then I can skip to this. And then it'll go through that one. That one's an H3. Here's an H2 and an H2 and an H3, 3, and a 2. So it'll allow you to skip around. Again, if all you have to do to get this feature to work is just use your H tags. That's it. So, and again, this really isn't new. I mean, every time you've ever written a paper ever, I mean, in high school or college, they tell you to organize your thoughts and put things in paragraphs. Well, that's what we're talking about here. It's not tough. The next one talks about robust, which means whatever solution you came up with, it really ought to work everywhere and maybe be like future-proof. Don't rely on some bizarre technology that either is going to go away or only works in one browser. Those kind of things cause problems. So you may know a little bit about some assistive technology like screen readers. Okay, fine, but don't just pick one and make it work. Okay. Different browsers and different operating systems do things considerably different. Have you guys ever noticed that whenever I do Visual Studio, I have Google Chrome and Mozilla and Opera and Internet Explorer. So whenever I go in here to Visual Studio, I'm going to go ahead and click this. So when I go in here in Visual Studio and I want to write a web page, I have some choices on how I want this thing to be rendered. I can even configure this so when I hit debug, it'll launch 4 different browsers. Well, Internet Explorer in this corner, and Chrome, and Opera, and Firefox, all simultaneously. Isn't that pretty wild? I'm not going to do that now, but I'm going to go ahead and pretend. So I pick up a project. Oh, come on, machine. Hey, I'm trying to get something done here. Behave. Okay, finally. I'm just going to let this stay where it is. I just want to be able to get to that point where I can show you that Jeez, this takes a long time. Yay! So I can run this in Internet Explorer, or I can do Firefox or Google, or I can go in here and pick more and make them all simultaneously. This is an excellent idea, particularly with trying to do design things that are kind of weird. So be prepared to have, if you're going to be a web designer in real life, you're probably going to have like 4 or 5 browsers installed in your machine. Yeah, just like this. That's just the way it works. Okay. On page 212, they keep going. They talk about writing for the web. So now we're talking about text-related things. So first is use headings and subheadings. Didn't I already say that? Yeah. Organize your thoughts just like paragraphs and use the headings and subheadings to be able to make it work. So again, headings. Cool. Again, there's lots of reasons for this. It provides white space. It's visually pleasing. Plus, assistive technology uses it to allow people to skip around, he said for the 14th time. Make your paragraphs kind of brief. Don't have huge... I don't know how big my largest paragraph is. It's probably not very big. That one's... Okay, that's probably about 4 or 5 lines there. But typically, not big paragraphs. I mean, just simple stuff. Kind of easy. Use bullet lists where possible to kind of break things up and to make them very, very concise. Just like you were doing like a PowerPoint presentation. You don't write a PowerPoint presentation like a speech where every single word you're going to say is on the slide. At least I hope you don't. You're supposed to just, make it bullet lists, bring their attention to keep their focus. That's kind of what this is about. It's writing for the web isn't that much different than writing for PowerPoint. Okay. When it comes to text, there's an awful lot of things that you can do. First one is talk about common fonts. So Arial is a common font that practically everyone has. Verdana, very good font. One of these days, I'm going to go change. I left mine at Times New Roman, which, by the way, is probably not a best practice. But, hey, shame on me. But you guys have to do it right. Verdana, Georgia, those are all good fonts. The Verdana font was specifically designed for the web, and it was specifically designed for accessibility and people with even like dyslexia. It was a font specifically designed for this. So, quite frankly, you really ought to be using Verdana. Almost all the machines have a Verdana or equivalent font already there. You should avoid the serifs. Serifs are these little things, instead of having just the letter I, it's got a little bar at the top and a bar at the bottom, right? Those are serifs. This is a serif type font. You can kind of see it's got the little frills on the corners and the bottoms and all that. That's not generally what you would use in a web page. It's perfect for print. These were designed for print media, not for the web. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark, so catch you again in just a few.